All right, so welcome everyone. We're excited you're here. And this is our February huddle, and I'll just give you a little preview of what we're going to be talking about. We are welcoming Dan Vicuña from Common Cause National, who's going to talk both about Trump's census order and also executive order, and also about some news about a local redistricting effort in LA. And then Trevor's going to talk to you about an Ohio local redistricting efforts that are going on. And we're going to talk about some stuff in the news about redistricting in Ohio and what you can do about it. We'll talk a little bit about map making in Ohio in 2025 and what we're expecting across the country in 2025. So really, without further ado, I think we'll just say hello and welcome, and we will get started. Dan, he's the Director of Redistricting and Representation at Common Cause National. He publishes the Gerrymander Gazette, which is super helpful about stuff that goes on across the country about gerrymandering. And Dan, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. Always great to be part of this group. Just the most amazing active group of volunteers in the country. Please don't tell other states I said that. I just want to start by, as Mia alluded to, talking a little bit about some things we're watching out of the Trump administration on the fair representation front. So just for background, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution requires that congressional apportionment is based on counting everybody, every single person who lives in the United States of America on April 1st of the day ending or the year ending in zero when we take the census. And that congressional apportionment, the division of congressional districts up between the states is also based on that total number of persons. And the last Trump administration attempted to exclude non-citizens, excuse me, son just came home from school, from that redistricting count. That would have huge consequences for fair representation. You'd see a massive shift of power, political power away from diverse areas of states, diverse areas of the country, where there are lots of immigrants, and a shift over to rural, less diverse, more conservative areas. You would see huge differences in population counts between districts, a big distortion of what's supposed to be equal representation for equal numbers of people. This is obviously a political power grab that would go against a couple hundred years of tradition, even at the very start of the Republic in the first census in 1790, even when we had racist policies like the 3/5 clause, even then the census still did not exclude non-citizens. It still counted, otherwise counted every single person. And then when the 14th Amendment, after the Civil War, was added to the U.S. Constitution, it solidified that all people would be counted. So this is a development we're watching in this Trump administration. Recently, they forced out the census director, who should have had a longer term, but he was pushed out. Hard to say which sort of Fox News talking head will take his place. We're watching that closely. But and then we can go and head to the next slide. Talk a little bit about, they haven't really done anything yet, any kind of positive, proactive moves towards distorting the census and politicizing it. But we know it's coming. And we know because there's already been a playbook on this when in the first Trump administration, when they were much closer to the census period. Background on that, Common Cause, our North Carolina team, had an amazing find. I think it was about 2018, if I remember correctly. We were handed the files of a man named Thomas Hoffler, who was a big GOP gerrymandering guru. I think one newspaper called him the Michelangelo of gerrymandering, and he conducted a study on behalf of the first Trump administration. He had contacts and emails with the political appointees in the Census Bureau and the Trump administration to do a study on what the exclusion of non-citizens would mean if you excluded them from the redistricting count and drew districts around only citizens, if you did apportionment based on a citizen-only count. And what he found in that study is that this would provide a big advantage to, quote, Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. So obviously the Trump administration was absolutely giddy about this. They attempted to add a citizenship question to the census in order to get this information and then redistrict on a citizen-only basis. There was a court case, a court challenge to this effort. The U.S. Supreme Court looked like, from oral arguments, it was poised to approve that effort to put a citizenship question, get the information, and distort redistricting in a political way. We uncovered the Hoffler files, rushed this evidence of the real reason why they wanted to do this to the plaintiffs in that case between oral arguments and the decision. The plaintiffs in that case submitted this to the court, who then it appears that the way the opinion is written probably reversed themselves. Like I said, we're poised to approve it. Struck down the citizenship question because the Trump administration was clearly lying in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act about the reason they wanted to add a citizenship question. They made a ludicrous argument about wanting to enforce the Voting Rights Act more effectively. So that was struck down. Following that, Trump administration just attempted to obtain the same information through administrative data, getting it from the states, getting it from federal agencies. Common Cause ran to court because, again, we knew that they were trying to use that information for an unconstitutional redistricting count, and we were the first to sue. But in the end, politics won out. Trump lost re-election. The court decided that the case was not yet ripe because they weren't sure how the administration would try to implement that order, but it didn't matter because he lost the election. But we know what they want to do. They want to politicize the census. They want to engage in discriminatory, ahistorical, unconstitutional redistricting. And so we're going to be watching out for it and be ready to fight when it comes down. But for the moment, all that's happened is a reversal of a Biden executive order merely stating existing law that you count everybody. So we'll keep watching. Again, be ready to fight and run a court if we need to.
And
So
Dan, I
that's
saw something today about them, the similar things that have happened on other government websites, that the census website had kind of, lost some of its pages, data, and it seems to have come back for now, but, same kind of attacks on these institutions.
yeah. I mean, that you raise a good point, which I will also add, sort of outside of my my usual work. We're kind of organizing our Doge watch to figure out how to effectively sort of put more than just a bucket in front of the fire hose of bad news coming from the administration, in particular this fake government entity that Elon Musk is leading, which is really looking to reshape the federal government in favor of the president's donors and Musk himself, really, to attack regulators that are protecting Americans. So keep an eye on that, and we'll be ready to respond.
Now, a totally different topic, but still, Dan, tell us about what happened in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so there are a lot of places, like Ohio, where statewide reform is challenging, and I've sort of wanted to kind of use we've won local reform in a lot of places, and most recently in Los Angeles, there's already statewide reform here, but it's just an interesting model for looking at an option for really kind of building a culture and understanding of redistricting reform, independent commissions, really people-powered redistricting from the ground up. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign that California Common Cause just ran to really reshape governance in Los Angeles. So then, hopefully, you folks can think about where there might be some opportunities in Ohio. A little background, redistricting Los Angeles has been very problematic and political for a long time. The previous existing redistricting body was a not independent commission, a commission in which there was direct appointment by city council members, and it was always problematic in terms of slicing and dicing communities for political purposes. About a little over 2.5 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, 3 city council members were caught on tape. They were having a meeting in a union office, and it was being taped for some reason. And 3 council members and one of the union leaders were caught on that tape using really ugly language toward Black residents of LA. And the context in which they were talking was the upcoming redraw of districts, how to really divide up communities and, disempower Black residents of the city. And that caused a huge scandal in LA. One of the city council members resigned. One of them lost a primary, and the other one just lost the general. And so they're all gone at this point. But that created an opportunity, and you can go to the next slide. Immediately, California Common Cause jumped in. They recognized this as an opportunity to push for reform because this ugly conversation, which got incredible press, was about redistricting. They advocated for the creation of a fully independent redistricting commission. Shortly, kind of right on the heels of that call, worked with a really diverse coalition around the city to come up with key principles for a commission, for what nonpartisan criteria would look like, what a fair appointment process would look like. It obviously looked a lot like what we tried to pass in Ohio. Go ahead and move to the next slide. It was a really arduous process. Serious props to the California Common Cause team, Russia Chavis Cardenas, and Alton Wong on our national team, who engaged in a lot of negotiation with city council members, city council staff. Fortunately, I think that because there had been a culture created because of the statewide commission, there was an immediate understanding among the other city council members who weren't caught being, disgusting, that the way to demonstrate their reformist bona fides was to call for an independent commission. But their first drafts were not great. They still left a lot of power in the hands of city council members. But we worked closely with them in a coalition that California Common Cause was in to really make the proposal look like a gold standard reform. Ultimately, the council did pass the measure. They placed it on two measures. One was for the city council, and one was for Los Angeles Unified School District, which includes some surrounding cities, not just the city proper. And on October 9th, 2024, with a little political poetry, picked the 2-year anniversary of the leaked tapes to have this press conference in front of City Hall, which is the picture you see on the slide, launching the campaign, which was a sprint to the finish for about a month. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide. And it was an overwhelming success. Common Cause wrote and signed the ballot descriptions. There was no organized opposition. In fact, nobody even wrote an opposition statement. And both measures, creating one independent commission for city council districts and one independent commission for LA Unified School District, they won overwhelmingly, more than 74 and 75% of the vote. So it was really great success. We're incredibly proud after decades of misbehavior by city council members. You can go into the next, if I don't, am I have a next slide?
I don't think you have one.
Okay, well, I'll just finish by saying, LA was certainly made easier, like I said, by the kind of public knowledge of the statewide commission's work and comfort with it. But we've also won there's been success in places where that's not the case. Cities like Austin, Texas, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Syracuse, New York, Bloomington, Indiana have Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mean, is an interesting example because I think understanding of that commission, comfort with that commission, led to statewide reform last cycle, creation of an advisory commission that really did amazing work to ensure fair representation for Latino and Native communities in that state. So this is really an opportunity in a kind of less, really less partisan setting there, of local government, where you can really impact, a level of government that is important to daily life. It's our schools, it's our police, kind of education system. So to really make a difference where it matters, I just hope it's an opportunity that you all think about getting involved in, and the national team at Common Cause is happy to help, just like we have in states all over the place where we've won reform. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that is exciting. I don't know. Ohio is special. But Trevor is going to talk to us about what some of the local redistricting that has been going on here, and yes, how we can get involved. So Trevor.
Thank you, Mia, and thank you, Dan. Um, Dan just laid out why local redistricting is so important, and if you just go ahead and head to that next slide there, we want you to get involved. The map drawing process should be, as Dan said, a people-powered process. And so here locally, bringing it to Ohio, after the census, we had some redraws in some local municipalities up in the Hudson. Our league participated in that and actually sent a report to the Hudson City Council about the Hudson redraw. More recently, up in Cleveland, they were doing redistricting, and I saw Michael Barron chime in. Even Democrats gerrymander, and we tried to get involved in that as much as possible. There's a picture of Nadia Zayam. She read testimony at City Council up in Cleveland. That's me holding the. We proposed a map. There you can see part of her testimony. She says, doesn't matter who does it, whether Republicans, Democrats, state officials, or local officials. I don't want to get into everything that happened up in Cleveland, but I saw Michael again chime in and say, maybe some local redistricting reform up there about an independent commission. Well, that was mentioned in testimony by a council member, so maybe there's some things going on. I can't fish around up there. Also in Nelsonville, there was a recent charter proposal up last November, issue 23. They voted to completely abolish their local government plan and go back to a statutory form of government. And so they will need to be redrawing wards here shortly. I was working with Debbie Schmeeding and Winda Sheard. I think I saw Winda here in attendance. We drafted a letter to the city council and the Athens Board of Elections, and we're able to prevent them from rushing into, establishing any wards, and really take some time, step back. And so that redraw process may take place, as maybe this summer. We are in talks, the local league in Athens, and Fair District advocates down there are working along with a Nelsonville City Council to see if we can establish a transparent and public process. So it's this is also down in Nelsonville. That's the first time a city has ever voted to abolish their charter and go back to a statutory form of government. So it's pretty interesting things going down there. If you go to the next slide. So it doesn't happen just every 10 years, redrawing. There's, within the Ohio Revised Code, section 731, there is that decennial census year where local municipalities will take a look at their wards and redraw if necessary, because there is a clause in there that requires substantial equal population. Now, what that means is up for debate, but there's some other ways. Nelsonville, they've adopted or abandoned an alternative plan, so there's a way that to be involved in redistricting. Also, anytime annexation takes place, that balloons the population to where another council member is needed. And then also, there's a clause in there that that because of that substantially equal population, the legislative authority, which is basically city council, can redivide the city into wards at any time if necessary to provide for that, and may authorize and provide for a census at any time. That also happened down in Nelsonville. They were a threat of being demoted to a village, and they took another census and found enough folks to reestablish themselves as a city and petition that to the Secretary of State and maintain their city status. So, you know, there's other ways to be involved, not just every 10 years. Also, there's 253 cities in Ohio. There's 192 of those are chartered cities. We don't know how many of them have, elected city council members to wards or districts. And there's also 2 out of 88 of Ohio's 88 counties, Cuyahoga and Summit, also have county council members, and they've recently done some redrawing. And actually, Summit has back in 2015 passed an independent commission for drawing the county districts. If you go to the next slide there. So how do we get involved? Well, like, it's good just to start asking questions. Like, as I said, we don't know, what do your wards, does your city have, are your council members elected to wards? Are they at large? What do your wards look like? What do your districts look like? The shape, the size, as far as population, demographics, community cohesion, keeping those communities together. What does your maps look like? When were they updated last? And what did that process look like? Was it an open and transparent and fair process? Was the public involved? When is the next redraw? Because there are different rules, because Ohio is a home rule state. We have those city charters, and there's different rules and guidelines in each and every one of those charters. And so you'll have to look at Cleveland was tied to population numbers. So because of their decrease in population, they had to shrink from 17 wards down to 15. So they had to do that redraw process. Over in Twinsburg, they do a review every 5 years to make sure their population is in line, but they also have a 10% allowance for deviation. Columbus, on the other hand, has only 1% deviation. We just did a redraw not too many years ago, while Grove City, right outside of Columbus, has a 20% population deviation, which seems pretty high, substantially equal. I don't know. Does something need to change? It's another question to ask. How do we reach out to us, Common Cause and the League, Fair Districts. We need these questions answered. What's it look like out there, and how can we help you get involved? We're here to help. So,
Sounds like there's plenty of opportunity
plenty-
for redistricting folks to get their teeth into some investigations about local redistricting, find out this basic information and see how you can kind of connect. So in our follow-up, we'll make sure you have Trevor's email in case you have questions about this. We're going to send a recording, we're going to send slides, and we'll send some additional information. Thank you, Trevor. I'm going to go on to Elizabeth, who's going to, I think y'all probably saw this, but we just want to call it out because folks should not be able to get away with stuff like this without being dragged through the public square. So Elizabeth.
Thank you. So many of you have likely already seen this, so I'm just really here to make you mad all over again. If this is the first time that you are seeing this article, apologies in advance for raising your blood pressure. I just put it in the chat. So to recap, last month, the chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, Alex Triafababa, and I'm sorry, I just don't care enough about this man
That's
to look
it.
at the correct
That's it.
pronunciation of his name. He was interviewed in the Fremont News Messenger, and among other gems that he shared was that to his surprise and delight, the last days of the Issue 1 campaign showed things that had really turned around in their favor. And he credited this to their campaign strategy, which he frankly said was to confuse voters. I guess thank you, sir, for saying what we all knew, that the opposition won by deliberately gaslighting voters. This is something that a politician would never have said out loud not that long ago. But these folks are genuinely shameless because they think that they are untouchable. Gross. Next slide, please. So what do we do with this well-deserved rage that we are feeling? We channel it into two things. One is shouting, and the other is staying engaged. I think it's really tempting to, just kind of throw up our hands and retreat to our beds, which sometimes is a perfectly sensible approach. But if we do that, we lose, right? So we need to just keep talking about it. So even though our opposition is shameless, people still need to see us shame them. And so we need to show up and we need to keep paying attention. When we see things like this, we have to call them out. And more positively, look for the local redistricting reform opportunities that Trevor was talking about. Look to the aspirational redistricting reform, things that have happened that Dan was talking about. For the local things, like Trevor said, if you know of something that is happening in your community, let us know because we may be able to support that. But getting loud is where we have power. So use your voice and your insights to tell other people in your world what's happening. Social media is awful and it is not your imagination. It is worse than ever, but it is still an effective communication channel to share accurate information. And it is where lots of inaccurate information is being shared. And so we can't just bail from these spaces. We need to still take up space there. One of the most effective ways to share information is almost old school, but group texts with family and friends and in private groups, private Facebook groups, next door groups, that kind of thing, even really small ones. They're great because you are a trusted messenger in these channels. Oops, sorry, that's obnoxious. And finally, write a letter to the editor. This is really old school. Some of you may remember a few months ago, Mia and I did a Fair District's letter to the editor training event, and we created a guide. I retooled it for occasions such as this, and in it you'll find best practices for writing a letter in a way that increases your odds of it being published. So things like letter structure, it has 70 or so contacts for local papers in Ohio, and a very rushed sample letter that I wrote earlier today to act as a template. So I think really, I heard someone else say this, I think Rachel Coyle say, we might be losing, but we can lose loudly and we can make things really uncomfortable for our opposition. So that is what I have to say about that. Thanks.
That's our mission, folks. Drag them through the public square. Let them know that they may have no shame, but we still understand what's right and wrong and what's okay and what isn't okay. So you probably joined tonight wanting to know about what's happening in 2025 with redistricting in Ohio. Wow, I'm going to spotlight myself. I don't think I've ever done that before. Wow. So here's just a little bit about what's happening this year. So we need to draw congressional maps this year because the congressional maps that were approved in 2022 were not bipartisan, and so they were only approved for 4 years. So that was the 2022 and 2024 elections. And so we are going to be going through the process of drawing the maps, and I'm on the next slide, I'm going to show you that process. But sorry, one second. It's going to end up being the Ohio Redistricting Commission, in all likelihood, that will do the work. And if you recall, that's the governor, the auditor, the secretary of state, and then 2 representatives from the majority party, 1 House, 1 Senate, and 2 representatives from the minority party, 1 House, 1 Senate. So that's 7 members. Now, I know you all were with us. We did a ton of work in 2021 and 2022 to fight against the bad maps that they were drawing. And we testified, and we had protests, and we had, teach-ins and all kinds of things. And they defied us, but it did enormously raise the understanding of what gerrymandering was and support for ending gerrymandering. And not only did it create, it helped with the signature gathering when we got to that point, but it also, it raised the whole people knew that they had broken the rules of the Ohio Constitution, and they knew that they had defied the court, and they knew that they had defied the will of the people. So, when they get around to drawing these congressional maps this year, or should I say when they draw bad maps, we can do that again. We can do it not for the sake of the fact that we think we're going to win, but because it will show that they are defying the Constitution and they're defying the will of the people. So, it's hard work, but that's our job. We're going to call these people to task. And just to remind you of this slightly complicated procedure, we redid this, Catherine and I redid this, because this is a 6-year map now. After the census, there was like a 10-year option and a 4-year option. Well, because we took the 4-year option, now we don't have 2 options. We just have 1 option, which is the 6-year option to finish out the rest of the 10 years. But the point is that the first deadline isn't until September. And if you remember from 2022, they just blew right through that. Actually 2021, they didn't bother doing anything by then. That's the General Assembly. So if the General Assembly hasn't done anything by September 30th, and we kind of assume they won't, then it'll go to the commission, and their deadline will be October 31st. Even if the commission doesn't do it by then, it's likely that they will be the ones that will do the actual map making work, and then they'll pass that along to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly can actually pass that plan, because in the commission they would have to pass it with 2 members of the minority party, and that's not very likely to happen. So the commission will probably do the work of drawing the map, and then they'll send it along to the General Assembly to pass, and then we'll have our 6-year map. So we can assume it ain't going to be pretty, and we'll have to do some pushback and letting the people of Ohio know that they're being cheated again by these folks. So that is something that we are looking to see happen in the fall. What else is going on this year? We wanted to let you know, there was a bill that was passed during lame duck, HB 74, which changed the rules for how the Attorney General can approve a ballot before people can start to collect signatures. In the past, he had to approve the summary, and then there was actually a court case because he kept rejecting a bill last fall because he didn't like the title, and they took him to the Supreme Court and they won, and they said, no, you don't have the ability to reject a ballot initiative based on the title. And so they put it into a bill that, yes, he now has the ability to reject certification of a ballot initiative based on the title as well as the summary. So that's unfortunate. And then a few days ago, in Cleveland.com, Mike Curtin, who I'm sure you remember from the 2023 battle against the attack on direct democracy, he basically told us we need to look out for a renewed attack. You know, they wanted to change from 50% for a ballot initiative to pass to 60%. They failed. Reproductive rights passed, you know, that fall, and marijuana. And in all likelihood, we don't know anything for certain yet, but in all likelihood, they will come after that again. We defeated them in 2023 in August. We defeated them soundly. So I feel pretty confident we can do that again. We'll get the band together. We'll go out and we'll say no on issue, whatever it is. And, you know, but just to let you know that it's not unlikely that, you know, that would happen again. So I don't know if I'm removing my spotlight, and I'm going to put the spotlight on Colin, who's going to talk to us next about things that are coming up kind of across the country. And, you know, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. There should be a Q&A there, and I'll take a look at the chat as well. But Colin, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Mia. And good evening, everybody. Always great to be with you. Just want to shout out 130 people on a call about redistricting in a rainy, cold February in 2025 is really something. And I'm just happy to be here with everybody. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in redistricting across the country. You know, Ohio is not in a vacuum with our, upcoming congressional map redraw. And again, the stakes really couldn't be much higher. As we know, after the 2024 election, the United States House of Representatives is currently in one of the narrowest majorities in American history, with the Republican conference currently having 218 members and the Democratic caucus having 215 members. Extraordinarily slim majorities, so every seat counts in the minds of the elected politicians in DC. And so when we are looking at across the country, the number of states that are currently either redrawing maps or have pending redistricting litigation, we see 10 states, including Ohio, have the potential to be redrawing their congressional districts in 2025 prior to the 2026 midterms. And just so we, just what we have a baseline, the 10 states that are combined to potentially draw their new districts account for 137 seats in the House of Representatives, over 30% of the entire chamber potentially is up for redraw. Now, being 100% honest, 137 seats will not get redrawn as a result of this litigation. However, that is the scope of states and possibilities that are currently pending. And so, there's a very real possibility that control of the U.S. House following the 2026 midterms could be decided based on the pending litigation and redraws that are happening in 2025. So if you like following what's happening across the country, if you like staying up to date on redistricting litigation, 2025 is going to be the year for you because there is a lot to follow. And I'm going to walk through the states that we are watching that have current litigation ongoing. So we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to try my best to not do one of the things I hate most when I'm doing a presentation, which is read off the slides. But, I've linked to every one of these cases. If you did, once we send out the slides and the recording, if you wanted to go back and review for yourself, please do. But I just wanted to include a couple bullet points. First and foremost, we're going to start in Arkansas, where there is currently a Voting Rights Act Section 2 claim that is being argued in their federal district court. Advocates are asserting that the second district in Arkansas was a racial gerrymander that was split intentionally to dilute Black voters' ability to elect a candidate of their choice. And so, we will again be following along with that. Going down to Alabama, Allen v. Milligan. If that name sounds familiar, it should, because Allen v. Milligan is actually the same redistricting case that was heard at the United States Supreme Court back in 2022, where the question in that Supreme Court case was whether or not Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act should withstand at all. This was the case we were championing and we were screaming from the rafters about, because this directly took aim at what remains of the Voting Rights Act. Happily, the Supreme Court rejected that claim and said, no, Section 2 still stands. And they remanded that case back to Alabama district courts for further argument and briefing. And trial in that case actually began this past, Monday on February 10th. So possibly new developments coming out of Alabama rather quickly. We can go to the next slide. Again, we're down in the South. That's going to be a recurring theme for these states. Florida, some of you may remember it was in the news that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pushed forward a congressional map that eliminated the historically Black 5th district, which normally encompassed Jacksonville and Tallahassee. We are still awaiting a ruling from the Florida Supreme Court as to the validity of that congressional map. That case has been fully argued, fully briefed. We're literally just waiting on a decision from the Florida Supreme Court. In Georgia, again, following the 2020 census, results came back that Georgia had an explosion of African American and minority population in the metro Atlanta area. However, the Georgia legislature failed to create a new majority or opportunity Black district in the metro Atlanta area. Voters and activists filed suit alleging that those decisions and that map was a racial gerrymander. And there are currently 2 separate appeals, one filed by both sides of the lawsuit, that are currently pending in the 11th Circuit. And we can go to the next slide. Not finally, there's still more, but we're staying down south, Louisiana. This lawsuit is particularly perverse in my mind. This is some of the this case is actually along the lines of what I would call, reverse racism. This is a lawsuit that non-African American voters in Louisiana are challenging the creation of the second majority Black district that Louisiana created earlier this decade. They are challenging that district under their 14th and 15th Amendment rights. So this is a very interesting case that I'll be paying very close attention to. SCOTUS has agreed to hear the case. Oral argument is set for March 24th, 2025. And we will again see how receptive the Supreme Court is in a race-blind or race-neutral interpretation of the Voting Rights Act, which, as we know, flies in the face of the intent of the Voting Rights Act, which Justice Jackson eloquently talked about in the Merrill v. Milligan case in Alabama. So that is particularly one to watch. Again, not finally, I'm sorry. We go down to North Carolina, where there are 4 specific congressional districts that are currently the subject of litigation. Some may remember that as a result of North Carolina's state Supreme Court elections in 2022, where we saw Republican candidates retake control of that body. We saw a historic move where that North Carolina State Supreme Court reheard redistricting litigation that they had already decided. They reheard it and went the other way, saying that North Carolina's legislature was able to draw essentially a partisan gerrymander that saw their congressional delegation go between 2022 and 2024 from an even 7-7 split to now a 10-4 split. District court litigation is still ongoing in that case. However, again, North Carolina, a major battleground in a state where several different congressional districts will be up for grabs. All right, now finally to the last slide, I swear. South Carolina, League of Women Voters versus League of Women Voters of South Carolina versus Alexander. This is a partisan gerrymandering case, one of the few that are currently still pending. That goes against this. The petitioners are arguing go against the South Carolina Constitution of free and fair elections and equal access to political participation. That litigation is currently before the South Carolina Supreme Court. And again, we'll be watching that one closely. Texas, actual 9 different lawsuits have all been consolidated in the Texas's League of United Latin American Citizens v. Abbott. Much like the Georgia litigation, this Texas litigation is centered on the fact that Texas had a major population boom recorded in the 2020 census, predominantly from Hispanic and non-white individuals, but the Texas legislature redrew their congressional map in such a way that they did not gain a majority minority or a majority opportunity district. So advocates filed suit, and actually this litigation pertains to their congressional, legislative, and Board of Education maps. So certainly one to watch. The case is ongoing in state district court and also at the Fifth Circuit. And then finally, Utah, we have another partisan gerrymandering case brought by the League of Women Voters of Utah. Essentially, they are claiming that the Utah state legislature unconstitutionally partisan gerrymandered their state because they put Salt Lake City in all 4 of that state's congressional districts. It is literally, I don't mean to make I don't mean to make a joke about this, but if you look at a map of Utah with their congressional districts, a literal crosshair falls right over the middle of Salt Lake City. And obviously, petitioners in that case are saying that that was an intentional partisan gerrymander and should be redrawn. That's an overview of everything that we're watching across the country, and I hope you do too. If I could close with one final thought. 10 states, including Ohio, are continuing to do redistricting. 9 of them are in litigation. And of those 9 states, 7 of them used to have to do pre-clearance through Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was destroyed in Shelby County v. Holger. Of the other 2, they were specific counties in those states that had to do pre-clearance through the Voting Rights Act. So we are still seeing the repercussions and the consequences of that disastrous ruling from 2013, where Chief Justice John Roberts essentially said we are in a post-race society. We know that is not the case whatsoever. And so I just, when I was preparing for this presentation, that stuck out like a sore thumb. And I think that's something that we need to be harping on when we're talking about redistricting and fairness when it comes to congressional and state legislative maps.
Wow, Colin, that is really, that's thank you for putting all of that together and for, making that point. That's incredibly important. it's so easy to knock down, it's hard to build things up and it's easy to knock them down and then you face the consequences, for a long time. Guys, that's what we have for you tonight. This is our inspiration. You're our inspiration. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep fighting for fairness, even though we are in strange times. No doubt about it on every level. And we'll keep you informed. We've been doing these monthly huddles since beginning of 2020. I don't know, something like that. Because our redistricting isn't going to be until the late fall, we may go to like an every other month schedule, something like that. We'll keep you informed. We value your contributions and your passion and your advocacy and your knowledge so very much. And we thank you for caring so much about Ohio and about democracy and about fairness. So thank you so much, guys. We'll send a follow-up tomorrow. And any last words from anyone? Or we say goodnight?
Oh,
Have a great evening, everyone.
Eliza had a question about the Electoral College, Dan.
Aha.
What was the question?
Catherine, tell us what it was.
Well, basically what she was asking is whether Common Cause is working on the Electoral College. And I thought before we had a few minutes that it would be worth mentioning. This is not about redistricting, but about how it is we get our president elected.
Yeah, I mean, we are supporters of the National Popular Vote Compact, and it's an active program area. So I don't have any kind of latest updates on where that advocacy is, but I mean, it is something we're involved in. Yeah.
We can send a link about it in our follow-up as well. So. Thank you guys so much. Have a
Thank
great
you, everybody.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.